coast to coast, the Pac-12 to the SEC, and every conference in between, Stoney Keeley and Stephen McCash break down all the action from the week that was in college football, react to the AP Top 25 poll, talk Heisman race, and dive into all of the most interesting lines of the week based on what the odds makers are saying in the SEC and on the national scale. This is the College Football Roundup on Sobros Network.
Welcome back for another episode of the College Football Roundup right here on Sobros Network, powered by Memo's Mexican Kitchen out here in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. If you haven't heard by now, Memo's Mexican Kitchen is my favorite Mexican food in the Nashville area. Well worth the drive out to Mount Juliet, just about a mile north of I-40 off of the Mount Juliet exit. Go check them out sometime. Let them know Sobros Network sent you. It is your boy, the EIC at SobrosNetwork.com. Big Natural Stoney Keeley. We're back to talk season predictions. Episode 2 of the 2024 College Football Roundup is here. Couldn't do it alone, of course. And with me, as usual, is the utility man at Sobros Network, McCash. McCash, we got some actual football to talk about on this week's show. How you doing out there today, man?
I'm as tired as I imagine the Delaware State Hornets are right now after that long-ass flight to Hawaii. Now, granted, I wish I was in Hawaii compared to the heat stroke of Memphis, Tennessee that I'm in right now. But, man, I can't complain. We are within, 72 hours, 48 hours of college football returning?
Yeah.
So let's go.
We got 4 games to talk about for week 0. We will do that by the end of the show, but we kind of wanted to go this week to do our season preview episode. We kind of wanted to go conference by conference, at least across the major 4, the big 4, and predict our favorites to win the conference, who we think is going to win, a potential dark horse in each conference race, and then a look at programs that might or might not have coaches on the hot seat by season's end. And then, of course, we're going to do the same thing for the entirety of the group of 5. You guys know McCash and I could go deep into each group of 5 conference, but if we were to do that, we would be here for 5 hours talking about San Jose State and UNLV and the like. So we're going to do that. We're going to give our official national championship previews ahead of our predictions ahead of the season starting, and then we'll talk Heisman race, and of course, like I said before, we're going to talk about the 4 week 0 matchups. So it's here, man. I mean, the season is on our doorstep. We've talked about the change and upheaval in the college football landscape, and now it's time to see how this product is going to play out. Let's start, McCash, with the biggest conference of them all, where the big boys play, the SEC. 4 straight national championships until Michigan knocked off Alabama in the semifinals last year, setting up a Washington-Michigan national championship. This year looks like another loaded field for the SEC. The favorites include Georgia. I saw Texas getting a little bit of love in this race as well. And then you have your Alabamas, your Ole Misses, your Missouris, Tennessees, all ranked inside the top 11. People are giving LSU some love. This looks like it's going to be another year where the SEC is pretty stacked from top to bottom. But let's kick our preview off with the ultimate question. Who's winning this thing in the SEC come season's end?
Realistically, I think there's 3 teams that could.
Okay.
And 2 of them are the familiar faces we see year in and year out.
Yeah.
I think one of the new additions could sneak in there, but I, like probably most of America, is going to ride with the Georgia Bulldogs to win the SEC this year.
Yeah, it's really hard not to. And I'm right there with you, looking at, Kirby Smart and the continuity of that program. There's a little bit of bad juju hanging over the Georgia Bulldogs right now, and I don't know if you're watching live on YouTube with us. First of all, hop in the comments and say hi. Let us know who you think's going to win the SEC and all that. I don't know if you believe in karma, but at a certain point, it kind of feels like all of the bad shit that's happening around the Georgia Bulldogs program might come home to roost, so to speak. But I don't know how you can look at this team on paper with the continuity of Kirby Smart at head coach and Carson Beck, who is a Heisman contender, probably, could be the top quarterback taken in the spring in the NFL draft next spring. And then you have Trevor Etienne transferring to Georgia. I mean, this looks like an offensive unit that is going to just mow people down yet again. And the defense is more of the same. It kind of feels like Georgia's just going to be Georgia. And as long as they're going to be Georgia on the field, then I don't know how you bet against them. And that's who I'm going with as well. But I'm curious, your rationale for other contenders in the SEC that you might have mentioned.
I mean, well, I got to go with Alabama as and Texas as my two other options.
Okay.
That's not even dark horses; these are actual potential teams that could win the SEC. And Alabama, granted, I think they take a slight step back with the loss of Nick Saban, because, I mean, if you're losing the GOAT, you don't replace the GOAT with the next GOAT. But I think Kalen DeBoer is going to do a great job in Alabama. He was able to get a lot of key players to stick around and also bring key players in with him. So it's just the fact that, it's a step back from losing Nick Saban, but they do have a tough schedule with Georgia and Tennessee and LSU and even Oklahoma on the road as well. I think Jalen Milroe will flourish and shine in DeBoer's offense. And then they've got some stud wide receivers with Bernard and Williams as well. So that's really why I like them as well. And plus, it's Bama. Bama hasn't forgotten how to win just because the head coach is different. And
I'm with you.
And then I think Texas is going to show the big boys that they indeed can play with the big boys. And Steve Scarseason and Quinn Powers are going to prove skeptics wrong, as they did last year. They got talented receivers as well, with Bond and Matthew Golden and Silas Bolden that came in from Oregon State. Their biggest question, though, is can they stop the run?
Yeah.
They've lost some good D linemen and Brian Murphy II. So that's their question mark right there for me going into the season. Can they stop the run on defense? But would not be shocked if either the Crimson Tide or the Longhorns ended up in Atlanta when it's all said and done.
A lot of returning talent on offense for Texas, and or at the skill positions, I think there's a lot of talent there. I noticed Zach in the comments said McCash giving us two bright horses. Yeah, I didn't mean to guide you for the dark horse question and then us talk about championship contenders. I think those are probably the three at the top of the SEC right now getting love. I also, to Zach says Carson Beck is just Jake Fromm with a better publicist. Buddy, you got to watch some of the Carson Beck tape. Carson Beck's got some good tape. And I think he probably will be the rightful first quarterback off the board next spring. I love Alabama. And I love specifically that Jalen Milroe stuck it out with Kalen DeBoer and Kalen DeBoer's track record at the quarterback position, with a guy like Milroe coming in, physically talented, being able to tap into his strengths. I'm looking at the Michael Penix Jr. highlights, the Washington Huskies last year, and just thinking about the potential for Jalen Milroe. And I think that's kind of the X factor for Alabama this year, is that if Kalen DeBoer can tap into that and get this offense going right away, then I think this could be a pretty fun Alabama team to watch. I'm not as high on Texas as everybody else. I get why they're getting the love that they are, but I just have questions about the defense there. And like you said, the ability to stop the run. Let's move on to the dark horse conversation, because I think there are some really interesting teams in the SEC this season that are just right outside that upper echelon of contenders. You look at Ole Miss returning Jackson Dart. Lane Kiffin has been a wizard in the transfer portal there. They're getting some love, ranked at 6th overall at this point. And then you have Missouri, who I think you can make a pretty compelling argument things were perfect in 2023, that they might have been a byproduct of a little bit of destiny there with the schedule setting up the way that it did, winning those one-score games. They lose a lot to the NFL, but I think they're returning enough talent. They have 2 games, the schedule this season, that they should be underdogs in, and that's at Alabama and at Texas A&M. And I think Texas A&M is a winnable game for the Missouri Tigers. So on paper, this looks like it should be a 10-2 season for Mizzou. And then you also have LSU getting some love from a lot of analysts. I don't personally see it with LSU. I think there's a ton of roster turnover there, some coordinating changes. I think there are questions about whether or not Brian Kelly is actually cut out to coach in the SEC at the highest level of competition there. But then there's also the Tennessee Volunteers with Nico Iamaleava. I just butchered that name, but I gave it my best shot. James Pierce Jr. could be a top 5 pick in the draft next spring on defense and edge rusher. You've got cornerstone pieces on both sides of the ball. I love the offensive system that Josh Heupel's installed there. Kind of makes it easy to just plug and run kind of deal. So I'm looking at these teams, the 5 that I just mentioned there, and thinking I wouldn't be surprised if any of these teams really made some noise in the SEC this season. What do you make of that group, and who of the group do you think has the best chance to really stand out and go on a real playoff run here?
I don't believe in Missouri like you and other people do. I think they're going to have a step back this year. The 2 that I really focus on as making that next step is LSU and Ole Miss. Again, I think Tennessee's going to have some struggles throughout parts of the season as well. But LSU and Ole Miss are the 2, especially Ole Miss with all the talent they're bringing back on offense. That offensive line is kind of scary down in Oxford. The caveat is going to be Jackson Dart being able to be consistent throughout the whole year. Their first 6 games of the year, they're not tested at all until they get that October matchup with LSU, which could be a deciding factor on who the potential 4th team is that could make the playoffs from the SEC. Because I see 4 teams coming out of the SEC to make the playoffs.
Yeah, we'll get to the predictions later, but I think I have 5. I do. Yeah,
okay.
I've got 5 SEC teams in the playoffs.
I just see, Tennessee having some really big games on their schedule compared to Ole Miss and LSU as well. And I think that's where they get tripped up and they're left on the outside looking in.
So who is your official dark horse pick for the SEC?
Hottie toddy, baby.
Okay. Yeah, I like Ole Miss a lot this year too. I'm going with Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M could be pretty good, pretty surprising this year. I'm a big Connor Wegman fan at quarterback. I think they have some talent there, and I know there is kind of a little bit of stink on the Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M. I think people like to look at the goofiness of him and just kind of poke fun at this program right now. But it's still a good program, and I love the hire of Mike Elko at head coach, and he was able to turn Duke around pretty quickly. Now I know Duke is Duke and Texas A&M is Texas A&M, but I think if things can gel quickly for Mike Elko and that program, I think this is a talented team that could surprise some people in 2024. So I'm going Texas A&M to be that surprise. And Zach says my horse should be called the Dark Knight in the comments.
So I do believe we'll know right out the gate about A&M because they opened the season against Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's a big game.
That'll tell for either team where they're going to stand in that playoff hunt.
Programs with coaches on the hot seat in the SEC, McCash, I lean towards Billy Napier and the Florida Gators. I think he's a good football coach. I just don't know. I have questions about the pressure in the SEC and how that shrinks the timeline that you have to really build out a program. He inherited a mess, and I think the Gators have been a little better than expected, but it hasn't happened quickly enough, and they haven't been competitive enough to warrant another optimistic outlook heading into the season. I think if Billy Napier struggles or Florida struggles, I think Billy Napier is the obvious choice to get the axe here. I don't know if that will be the case or if they will play the patient game with him. If so, I think he could develop a nice little program there. But I think Billy Napier is the obvious choice. Who do you have for the hot seat watch?
Look, I just copied and pasted our notes from last year, and it is Billy Napier. If you look at Florida's schedule, especially the last 5 games, it's ferocious. You got number 1 Georgia, they go to number 4 Texas, come home for number 13 LSU, home for Ole Miss at number 6, and then finish the season at number 10 FSU.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about having patience. I believe the first part of the season, if they stumbled, Florida fans and such would have patience. But when you get to that second half, those final 5 weeks, Lord, that man I might not make it to the end of the season.
And I'm glad you brought up last season as well, because we were kind of having a similar conversation about Billy Napier a season ago. We weren't saying that, oh, the results on the field warrant him being fired, but we were talking about Florida fans already having questions about his ability to turn this program around and right the ship there. So I kind of feel like Gator fans are already getting a little patient, and you wonder how the boosters feel about how he's doing with the program, because that's the ultimate ticket right there. It's like if the boosters start threatening to stop writing those checks, you're cooked, buddy. So I'm curious to see how the situation in Florida plays out. I would also mention Shane Beamer at South Carolina. I mean, he's had some rock star moments, but he's also had some pretty disastrous moments. There's been a lot of ups and downs, and I kind of wonder, as the league expands and as the league gets a little more competitive, if the boosters and fans of that program will also want higher expectations moving forward. So I think if Billy Napier's not the answer, I'm looking over there at South Carolina. But is there any other coach in the SEC that you would mention in this conversation to say, hey, watch out for the hot seat this year?
Absolutely. I mean, the easy answer every year is to look right inside Nashville at Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
but
well,
we're not
they don't seem
count.
to care.
They don't care, so we shouldn't care either. No, I'm looking across the Mississippi River over in Arkansas at Sam Pittman.
Oh, good answer.
He's desperately got to get his team back to a bowl game without a shadow of a doubt. He's going to rely on Bobby Petrino to get the quarterback that transferred from Boise State, turn him into a star. Their O-line is probably going to struggle this year, so I wouldn't be shocked if Sam Pittman's out at the end of the year, and we look going into next year that Bobby Petrino has returned from the dead to coach the Razorbacks.
That would be, I mean, let's be honest, that would be good for college football if we got Bobby Petrino back in a head coaching position.
Yes.
Let's move on to the Big Ten, the literal biggest conference in college football this season. 18 teams now, with the addition of Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA. To me, I think this is a really interesting conversation that you could have about who's winning this conference, because I do feel like there are 2 really good contenders. The conversation to me comes down to Oregon and Ohio State. With Ohio State, they have a wealth of talent, especially with transfers. Will Howard at quarterback, coming over from Kansas State, had a good 2023 campaign, and then Quinshon Judkins taking the running back job, sharing a backfield with Travion Henderson, transferring from Ole Miss, and then the big get at safety, Caleb Downs exiting Alabama, joining Ryan Day's program up there in Columbus. You still have talented wide receiver Emeka Egbuka coming back, could be a first-round draft pick. You have Jack Sawyer on the defensive side. This team looks absolutely loaded to the brim with talent. The question is, can Ryan Day beat Michigan? Because I think that's what's really starting to drain Ohio State fans on Ryan Day, is that he's lost 3 straight to the Wolverines. Then you look over on the West Coast, and I think it's Oregon, and they're going to be my pick to win the Big Ten. Dillon Gabriel, the Heisman favorite. You've got a pair of wide receivers in Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart transferring from Texas A&M. Dan Lanning is one of the best college football coaches out there. They've got an offensive line that has 2 bookend tackles that are going to be playing on Sundays, and the defense should be elite. To me, I look at these two as the most complete teams in the Big Ten, and I am giving the slight edge to the Oregon Ducks here just because they are so loaded on offense and should be able to score at will this year. Is there another team in the fold for you, McCash, or are one of these two going to be your pick to win the conference?
No, those are my two to pick from. I think it's those two and everybody else vying for third.
Yeah.
I like Oregon a lot, like you do. I do think getting the Oklahoma transfer Dylan Gabriel is a great way to fill Bo Nix's big shoes that he left behind. They've got an elite skill talent and a loaded offensive line there in
Yeah.
Oregon. Their defense isn't quite as imposing as Ohio State's, as maybe some other teams in the conference are, but I think they've got enough to be able to compete with Ohio State with that. We all know Michigan's going to take a step down this year. They'll still be a good team, don't get me wrong, but that's where I think Ohio State has the edge because I do think Ryan Day is going to be able to get the job done and beat Michigan this year. Because if he doesn't, he has already hired his replacement, and that is the one and only Chip Kelly, who I think will be the biggest reason why Ohio State not only wins the Big Ten this year, but makes its way through. I don't want to give any spoilers away right now, but I think they're going to go deep into the playoff because I think they have the most complete roster in all of college football.
There you go. Any love for Penn State in this conversation, because they are getting some love in the preseason polls, but for me, I feel like we have the same conversation about Penn State every summer, and it's, can they win the big games? Can they beat the Michigans? Can they beat the Ohio States? And then they go out there and they don't win those games, and they don't really amount to much by season's end. I know there's some talent there. People seem to think that Drew Aller can play in the NFL. I don't personally see it myself just yet, but I kind of feel like this is a roster that looks like the same old Penn State to me, and I don't have the confidence to put them up there with the playoff contenders.
Look, I just went blank on their head coach.
James Franklin
from Vanderbilt. Jesus. I've always been a massive fan of his, so much so I couldn't even remember his name. But he lets me down year in and year out when I get on that Penn State train, and in about week 7 or 8, everything comes off the track. So I can't believe in them until I see them do it.
For my dark horse, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I'm going with the Iowa Hawkeyes. And it does come down to defense for me. This was a really, really good defense in 2023, but they just so happened to share the field with arguably the worst offense in college football. It feels like, this is going to shock some people, but they've got another good tight end in Iowa coming back this year. They've got some talent at the running back position. Cade McNamara coming back from injury hasn't really lived up to the hype after transferring from Michigan. But if they can just get some stable, some steady quarterback play to improve the offense minimally, I mean, just get up off the floor kind of deal, I think Iowa could be a force to be reckoned with because of how good that defense is going to be yet again this season. And when I look across the Big Ten, I just don't know that any other team in the middle of the pack has an elite unit that's going to keep them in games the way this Iowa defense is. And that's why I think if they can just get some steady quarterback play, I think they're going to be a factor in the Big Ten race. Who's your dark horse for this season?
Well, the sexy pick that is going around to contend is Rutgers.
Yeah,
that's not my pick, but I do believe Rutgers will have its first ever winning season in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
they have one of the best running backs in the nation, and they got a veteran squad that's bought into Schiano's way of coaching and playing. But man, I got to go with the team that has the longest bowl drought in all the power conferences. And that's the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
How about that? Let's go.
That's my dark horse this year. They've been hinting the last couple of years of making that next step. And I do believe with that 5-star quarterback they got in Dylan Raiola, I believe I pronounced that right. Leading that offense with all the skill talents that they have. I do believe especially with their schedule not being as daunting as maybe in years past, Nebraska could not only make it to a bowl game, but might finish in that that top 5 of the Big 12, Big 10 this year.
I don't know about you, but I felt this was the hardest conference to look at and determine who might be on the hot seat here, because I do think you have a lot of new coaches that are going to get a couple of years. I think you have a lot of other coaches that are doing pretty good work right now too. I think there are some teams in transition where maybe the performance, you look at like the Michigans and the Washingtons, rosters in transitions, new head coaches, they could come back down to earth a little bit, but their fan bases are going to be patient because of all the changes this summer, this offseason. So it was kind of different. I know the popular pick is Mike Locksley in Maryland, but I don't know how you fire him unless it's just like a 2-10 type of season where it's just an outright disaster. I don't know how you fire him after the way he's elevated that program from what it was before he took over. So my answer, I like I said, it's kind of hard to come up with this, but I do see a scenario in which Bielema ball in Champaign, Illinois gets a little tiring because we're a few years into this experiment. You would think his style, big old hog ass offensive lineman running the ball, that type of play would play well in the Big Ten. And I think Illinois has delivered above expectations in a couple of his seasons there. But I do see it difficult for this program to take the next step if they don't get out there and do it this season. Like, I feel like they might flip that hourglass on Brett Bielema if he doesn't get it done in 2024. Who's your coach on the hot seat in the Big Ten this season?
See, I'm with you where it was kind of hard to decide like who is the one, because there's a lot of new faces in the Big Ten. It's a lot of new teams as well. UCLA has a new coach. Michigan State has a new coach, and so forth. So I went with one maybe people aren't thinking about right now. We just talked about him, and that's James Franklin.
See, there's an interesting conversation there because I've heard the rumblings that they're perfectly fine with James Franklin, that he can be there as long as he wants, as long as he loses those big games. But I go back to my point about other coaches we talked about. How much is enough? Where, like, when do you get to that point where enough is enough and the boosters and the fans start calling for his head? And I think, you're starting to see some of that with Penn State.
I agree. That's partly why I brought his name up, because of the fact, I mean, he's been there over a decade now since leaving Vanderbilt, and I don't think, have they won a Big Ten championship since he's been there?
I think they won one? And it was the year that they got in over Ohio State in a tiebreaker. It was 2015 or 2016. They won the Big Ten championship, but they had 2 losses, so they were left out of the playoff, even though they won the Big Ten conference. And Ohio State got in, and that might have even been the year that Ohio State won it all. I can't recall off the top of my head.
So he doesn't really have a lot of hardware to show for his time at
fair enough
in Happy Valley. And at some point, you got to get tired of being number 3 when you've been staring at Michigan and Ohio State for the better part of that decade plus now, watching them contend for national championships every year, the playoffs, the Big Ten championship, and so forth. Yeah, and then you've got teams like Iowa, like we talked about, Rutgers, Nebraska, taking the next steps up, and Michigan will be back in a year or two.
Yeah,
and hopefully Michigan State and UCLA have made the right coaching changes so they can do the same. So if I'm the alumni group and the boosters and such, and at Penn State, this might be the year I start looking.
Yes, trying to get ahead of the curve, so to speak, on James Franklin there. Let's move on to the Big 12. McCash, I'm going to tell you, this conference kind of feels like it's wide open. I'm going to list a few teams here: Utah, Kansas State, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Iowa State, West Virginia, and UCF. Would it just completely shock you if any of those teams won the Big 12 this year?
I've only got one team I truly believe in.
Okay.
But if we're going to talk dark horses and such, which we will in a minute, then no, it wouldn't surprise me if any of those teams won. But I'd be completely shocked if Utah does not win the Big 12 this year.
I'm with you. Utah's my pick as well. It is super simple for me. Kyle Whittingham, stabilizing factor atop that program. Cam Rising coming back for I think is his 15th year at Utah. And then an elite defense. Like the formula is not complicated. There's turnover in the Big 12. There's a lot of really talented teams, as we'll go through the list a little bit. But to me, I think I trust Utah the most. That's the way I would put it, and that's why I'm picking Utah to win the Big 12 as well. But what is your rationale for going Utah here?
It's everything you said. I was like chomping at the bit to see Cam Rising play last year.
Me
And
too. Yeah.
every week we got a tease that he could be back this week. It may be next week. So blah
Yeah.
blah blah. That defense was solid last year. They returned 8 starters on defense. The only concern I see for them on running back on offense is if a running back will take the ball and run with it. Other than that, I think they have the most solid roster of any team in that conference.
Kansas State is an interesting program that I think could rise up and become a contender in the Big 12. But I think when you look at some of these other teams in the fold, I get from a betting perspective, it's a pretty close race between like the top 4 to 5 teams. But the rest of these teams to me have a glaring issue, or at least a big question that needs answering before you can call them a complete team. You look at Kansas State. I love dual threat quarterback Avery Johnson, should be an electric player to watch this season, but they've got 4 new starters across the offensive line. That's going to impact their ability to run the ball. You look at Arizona, super talented on offense with Noah Fafita at quarterback, and then Tataroa McMillan. I butchered that name, but he's a wide receiver that could be a first-round draft pick next spring. Really, really good talent there, but you wonder, how do they navigate the coaching change with Brennan coming in there from San Jose State? Like, is it a good enough roster? Is it a good enough situation for him to just come on in and autopilot this bitch to a Big 12 championship? I don't know. There's a fair question there. And then you look at Oklahoma State. You want to talk about continuity. McCash, Oklahoma State is returning 20 starters, including Ollie Gordon II, the prolific running back. I think the question with Oklahoma State is a coaching question. And I know Mike Gundy's been in Stillwater forever, but at the same time, we've seen the results. We've seen some pretty big coaching snafus in big games from Gundy and Oklahoma State in recent years. I think it's a fair question. With Kansas, you have Lance Leipold, Jalen Daniels at quarterback. You've got Devin Neal at running back. You got 3 good wide receivers and offense that should be electric, but you wonder, can the defense stop anybody? And then with West Virginia, they've got a good offensive line, but are they limited in their playmaking potential? So I think there is a wide array of suitors for the Big 12 championship game, but I land on Utah as the Big 12 champion. Who is your dark horse, if anybody from this bunch? And I didn't even mention the experience that Iowa State has coming back under Matt Campbell and that program. They should be pretty good. They should be as good, if not better, as the Brock Purdy era in at Iowa State. But who is your dark horse in the Big 12 this year?
Well, I was hoping you weren't going to mention Iowa State at all, because that is going to be my dark horse. But first, I just want to say I love how we talked about the Big 12 here, not once mentioned Colorado or Deion Sanders.
Well, listen, that offensive line is pretty bad, and it is bad enough to hamstring that entire unit. And if it's not better, we're going to get similar results to what we got in 2023, and that's Shedeur Sanders fighting for his life to make a play, and the entire offense depending upon that. And I just, I'm not very high on Colorado.
No, I'm not high on their coach or anything. But Iowa State is my 1. My 2 would be Oklahoma State, as you mentioned, and I mainly go with the fact that you mentioned their 20 starters that they're returning, and the fact that their schedule might be the easiest of anybody that's in the Big 12 this year, because they get to skip a lot of the better teams in the Big 12 this year by luck. But I love Iowa State. I saw them in person last year at the Liberty Bowl. On paper, this is Campbell's best team since he had Brock Purdy down in there. They're returning Rocco Beck, was the Big 12 Freshman of the Year He played lights out. And then their running back, Abu Sama the third. Oh, he exploded on the scene last season, late in the year. But when he came against that Memphis Tigers defense, he got shut down real quick.
There you go.
Their defense is a super experience, and their schedule looks to be one of the toughest of those top teams in the Big 12, but it's kind of spread out. So they'll get a couple tests early in the season, and then the rest on the back end. So I think if they can get through that first stretch where they're like 6-1, 7-1 before they get to the tough part of the end of the schedule, I think Iowa State could make some noise in the Big 12 this year.
Owen in the comments agrees with us. Colorado is a flop. I tend to, that lines up with my thinking on the Buffs program. And then Jake just joined us, said UCF could scare some cats. I agree, man. They pulled KJ Jefferson away from Arkansas. I liked watching him play quarterback. UCF, I think there's like a quiet contingent of UCF lovers out there that are thinking this could be a sneaky good team in 2024. The Big 12 feels wide open. My dark horse in this race, I'm going with the Kansas Jayhawks. I absolutely love that Kansas football is good again. Lance Leipold, I don't know how to pronounce it, doing a fantastic job there. It's a really fun offense to watch. Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal together with those wide receivers should be electric. And it might not matter if they can't stop a nosebleed if they're going out there and scoring 50 points a game. So let's see these Jayhawks do it. As far as the hot seat goes, this one was pretty easy for me to make McCash. I'm looking at Baylor, Dave Aranda, 12-2, won the Sugar Bowl in 2021. The man is 9-16 since, and it's just in a year where this looks like it could be anybody's ball game in the Big 12, for Baylor not to be competitive, I think is pretty damning for that program. And I think we're not talking about Dave Aranda ending up on the hot seat by the end of the year. I think Dave Aranda is already on the hot seat. And if he doesn't perform well, it could be axe time for him. But who's your coach on the hot seat from the Big 12?
Yeah, the Baylor head coach is really the only name that stood out to me, because you're looking at BYU, Cincinnati, and probably Houston as the bottom three, along with Colorado and Baylor in that conference. Obviously, Deion's not going anywhere. But BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston still being so new to the conference, and I do believe Houston just got a new head coach anyway.
Willie Fritz from Tulane.
That's right. I don't see there being any changes anywhere in the conference outside of Baylor, really, unless somebody just completely shits the bed this year. But I don't really see anybody outside of those bottom 4 or 5 teams really needing to make a change.
Listen, I give Neil Brown a ton of credit because he was firmly on the hot seat heading into the 2023 season. And then he's like one of the, how often do we see a guy on the hot seat actually coach his way off of it? Yeah. But West Virginia goes from 5-7 to 9-4 in 2024. That's a tough football team. I think it was a damn good coaching job because this is an offense that was kind of built around firepower, that Neil Brown just looked at his program and said, hey, we got some big old hog-ass offensive linemen. We can run the ball. Let's do it. And when you got a guy like Zach Frazier at center who's now playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you build your offense around it. Some of the best tape I watched last draft cycle was Zach Frazier going up against Penn State's defensive front in that game. So, I mean, you could say maybe Neil Brown isn't too far removed from being on the hot seat, but I still go back to Baylor. Jake does ask, could Sonny Dykes be on a hot seat if he has another poor season, even after being 2 years removed from a national championship game? Jake, that's an interesting question, because I think you can safely look back at that TCU team and say it was a little bit lightning in a bottle. And I think it's safe to wonder, like, how much of their success was just solely based on the talent. And I can remember everybody kind of being happy for Sonny Dykes to get to that moment, but I don't remember a whole lot of people that were just like, whoa, yeah, Sonny Dykes has done a tremendous coaching job there. So what do you think about Jake's question there, McCash? Sonny Dykes on the hot seat?
It may be a little premature for that. Give it really, I mean, they're I see them being like a 7-5 like a 8-4 type team. So
Yeah.
I think they're going to be too good, really, for not too good, but just in that right medium, lukewarm spot where he doesn't get much heat underneath him, because they'll make a bowl game at 8-4 or 7-5, what have you, and
Yeah.
that might be good enough.
So let's talk about the ACC then. This is another conference that I kind of see as a two-horse race between Florida State and Clemson. Florida State, you love Mike Norvell. I mean, he's just done a
Yes, I do.
fantastic job down there in Tallahassee. They're only returning 8 starters, but they get DJ Uiagalelei away from Oregon State, maybe kind of holding steady at the quarterback position. But I ultimately land on the Clemson Tigers, and it pains me to say that because I hate Dabo Swinney, and he's drawn some criticism from Tigers fans for not really getting into the transfer portal, notoriously behind the times, according to a lot of people that say like he's just not going to adapt to the modern college football landscape, and I think it bit him in the ass last year. But there is a bit of stability with Cade Klubnik. Didn't really play well in 2023, but still has a wealth of potential. They're going to have 4 returning starters along the offensive line. There's only 2 returning starters on that defense for Clemson, but they've got a wealth of talent at every level. And I think this is going to be one of those years where the ACC is kind of top heavy and Clemson just goes out there and plays boring ass football. Maybe Florida State's inexperience, the roster turnover there kind of causes an early season loss or two, that because they haven't gelled quite yet, and Clemson's just kind of steady Eddie the whole way through, and they're just running the ball, dinking and dunking, playing electric defense en route to an ACC championship. That's why I land on Clemson to win the ACC. But McCash, who do you got? And are there other teams that you think we should include in the conversation besides those 2?
This is where I blow everybody's minds. I'm mainly looking at schedules here.
Okay.
And this team only plays one ranked team the whole year, even in conference play.
Okay.
And I think they're going to have the most talented offense in the Atlantic Coast Conference this year. They have an aggressive defense. They've got a new coach as well. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, the Miami Hurricanes will win the ACC this year.
How about that?
They will not be the best team in the conference, but at the end of the day, they'll have the best record that puts them there.
I like the overhaul defense there. I'm a big fan of Cam Ward at quarterback there, transferring from Washington State. I think that's a team that many consider like number 3, a clear number 3. And I have seen a few analysts giving them some love to win the conference because of the questions of turnover at Florida State and electricity, dynamic playmaking ability at Clemson, so to speak. Miami could be the team to capitalize on that. Louisville, I like Jeff Brom. I love me some Quincy Riley at cornerback, but I kind of feel like they lost a lot of important positions to the NFL. Jack Plummer's currently playing for the Carolina Panthers. Jawar Jordan's with the Houston Texans. Jamari Thrash with the Cleveland Browns. Their center is in camp with the Detroit Lions. There's some turnover there on offense. And if you look back at 2023, I mentioned this about Missouri and things like the stars just kind of aligning and falling perfectly for Missouri in 2023. I kind of think the same thing happened for Louisville. Great story, top 10 team, made it to the ACC championship game, but I think this is a season where we see them kind of come back to earth and normal expectations there a little bit. Dark horses. I might blow some people's minds with this one, but I think Virginia Tech's going to be really good this year.
Really?
11 returning starters on offense, including Kyron Drones. The defense returns 8 starters. This is a unit that allowed just 23.8 points per game. So you're looking at a program that is coming together. It's year 3 in the new coaches. Damn, I didn't even jot his name down. Now I'm drawing a blank on it. But we're a couple of years into the rebuild at this point, with everything coming together for the Hokies, and the conference, to me on paper, kind of looking like it's begging for another team to rise up to the ranks. I think Virginia Tech's going to be pretty good this year. So that's my dark horse. Who is your dark horse in the ACC?
It's real simple. Everybody knows I'm an ACC homer. I love my University of Memphis Tigers, and I hate to see SMU leave for higher pasture, but the SMU Mustangs are my dark horse. I think they meet Miami in the ACC championship game, leaving Clemson and FSU.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Now that is a spicy take right there.
It again comes down to schedule. The only ranked team that SMU plays at this state of the season is Florida State midway through the season.
I think you could look at 4 or 5 different programs in the ACC that could potentially have a coach on the hot seat. I think for me, the easiest place to look is Justin Wilcox at Cal, already on the hot seat. And you're looking at a guy that has to guide a program into the ACC where they are literally across the country. How do you navigate all the travel to get to these games on top of getting your program to the next level? Wilcox is known as a defensive guru, but I kind of feel like the act is wearing a little thin in Berkeley. Like I said, I feel like you could go a number of different directions with the ACC coach on the hot seat, McCash, but who is yours?
I don't know if I really have one right now. I mean, Stanford would possibly, because Stanford, I think, used to be such a great program in multiple sports, but it's basically like given up and be like, hey, we'll just be the Vanderbilt of the West Coast.
We'll just accept our fate.
And we'll just, hey, if we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. No big deal. So yeah, I don't know if I really have one for the ACC. I would love to say, and I'm going to do, you know what? Fuck it. I'll do a hot take again.
Let's do it.
I think because of his inability to join the TikTok, way of thinking these days, Dabo, if he doesn't make some progress this year, because he's not looking into the transfer portal, he doesn't care about the NIL deal, obviously, Dabo might be time to go out of Clemson.
I love it. Let's fire fucking Dabo Swinney on this podcast. Yeah. I'm with it. I'm not a big Dabo guy. I'm not a fan of his. So that leaves us with the group of 5. Boise State is just getting like all the love for the group of 5 playoff spot. It's Boise State or Liberty that I'm seeing. I don't know like if you've read any different, but Liberty, man, listen, shout out to the Flames, undefeated season, Conference USA championship, all that. But I look at it as Jamie Chadwell, Caden Salter, and that's about it. And their schedule sucks, man. Like their best game is at App State. Even if they win Conference USA and go undefeated, I don't know how you can conceivably measure them as a contender against schools from other stronger conferences. So I don't have Liberty winning the group of 5 bid to the playoff. With Boise State, Spencer Danielson has the program heading in the right direction, some momentum that won him the job to end the 2023 campaign. Got a good quarterback, good running back. The defense is returning a bunch of starters. They allowed less 20 points or fewer in the final 4 regular season games. I get the Boise State hype. I love the Memphis Tigers, and you and I have talked about them a lot, a wealth of talent there. Seth Hennigan returning. By the way, as you pointed out earlier this week, Seth Hennigan on the Senior Bowl watch list for 2025. I think this is a team that can rise up and claim a playoff spot out of the group of 5. What do you think about this group of 5 race, McCash? Who comes out on top and who gets to the playoffs?
So I think Liberty, no matter what they do, have no shot in hell in making the playoffs.
I just don't know how with that schedule.
No, they ran the table last year, and just because SMU lost, what was it, to Tulane in the championship, however it came down, I forget. They get the voters or the committee gave Liberty the spot, and then you saw what happened. You saw what
They got
happened in the
smoked.
bowl game. They got
45-6. 45-6.
And if you do it again this year, it'll the same thing, whether it's Oregon or somebody else. The thing is, I like Liberty. I think their coach is doing a phenomenal job. It's just you got to start playing tougher competition outside of Conference USA. Another sexy choice that I just don't completely get behind is UTSA from the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have too many questions throughout.
They had their shot last season with all the veteran talent they had. I think there's going to be a little bit of turnover there, and this should not be the season for expectations at UTSA. No.
So it does come down to really, truly two teams, and that is Boise State and Memphis. Boise State has a tough early matchup with Oregon. I believe the weekend before Memphis plays at FSU. So they both get a test at the highlight of what it would be like to be in the playoffs by playing a playoff caliber team early in the season. They both have somewhat similar schedules the rest of the way, but I do give an edge to Memphis. The schedule being a little tougher because we play our toughest games on the road this year. But when it comes down to who's going to make the playoff, I'm going to shock the world, and I'm going to tell you Boise State makes the playoff this year, as well as the Memphis Tigers.
2 group of 5 teams in the playoffs. My goodness, you are in the lab today. The mad scientist just spitting out the takes today.
It might be meth I'm cooking, but man, let's go.
I like that. As far as dark horse from the group of 5, I'm looking at App State. Man, this is still the same old App State team, and they might be able to capitalize on a Sun Belt conference that has several contenders from a season ago in transition this year. They also play Clemson, so you don't really think they're going to beat Clemson, but you could get a good measuring stick of how they stack up against a contender. I think App State is that one team that just that brand is so strong in the group of 5. I think they can capitalize, stack some wins in the Sun Belt. Maybe they could rise up and surprise. You got a dark horse from the group of 5?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go Tulane. I love the hiring of Troy's head coach. They also brought in one of Oregon's quarterbacks as a transfer. I think there's a lot of good pieces still down in New Orleans. So I'd give them a puncher's chance at competing for that spot.
As far as coaches on the hot seat, it's kind of difficult to do here with the group of 5, but I'm looking at East Carolina and trying to get them over the hump. Mike Houston has not. 5 seasons now. They had one good year. They went to the Birmingham Bowl, and other than that, it's been 24-34 total, including the good season there. 2-10 last year. This is a program that has had some really good teams. I feel like it is a mid-major storied program in the group of 5. And I just wonder after half a decade, if we don't see him turn it around this year, if East Carolina is going to look in a different direction. You got any coaches on the hot seat from the group of 5, McCash?
I would be lying if I told you I really looked that up. I wasn't expecting us to do group of 5 hot seat. So no, I don't have anybody.
All right, let's move on then to the national title predictions. I've got 12 playoff teams written down. I don't know if you prepped that much or if you've just got the national championship, but I will let you offer up your picks if you got them.
Yeah, I've got 12.
Let's hear them.
I did not rank them. I don't know if you went that far or not.
I did rank them, yeah.
Okay, well, I can kind of do that as we go. 1, I'm going to go Ohio State. 2, Georgia. I'm going to go 3, Utah. 4, because they're a conference champion, I got to go Miami. 5, that's the only 4 conference champions we're ranking, right? Because we don't count group of 5.
Well, the top 4 get the buys.
Right.
Top 4 conference champs get the buys, and then everybody else is just a wild card.
5, I'm going to go Oregon at 5.
Okay.
6, I'm going to go Bama.
Okay.
7, I'm going to go. Oh, let me scratch them off as I'm going, so I don't repeat anybody. I'm going to go Notre Dame.
All right. Yeah.
We didn't talk about them because I forget they don't play conference.
They're not
games.
in a conference. Not in a conference.
I got to go 8 to Texas. I think I've lost some teams. 9, I'm going Ole Miss.
Okay.
10, woo! This is where I'm really smoking crack.
I had trouble with 2 of mine.
All right.
As well, and one of them is my 5th SEC team, and I struggled with it because I just didn't want to put 5 SEC teams in the playoffs.
I didn't because I didn't want to either. 10, I'm going SMU.
Okay.
From the ACC, that's the second ACC team, and then 11, I'm going to go Memphis, and 12 would be Boise State.
Look at that. That's a playoff field right there. We need to make that graphic because that's going to go viral on Twitter right there. If we can cook that up. Mine might go viral too, but
people think I'll have a stroke when I get to like the 10th spot.
So I'm going 1 through 12. I'm going Georgia, Oregon, Clemson, Utah, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Ole Miss. All right, this is where we're going to get thrown off the air. At 9, I go with Iowa. I'm going Iowa at 9.
Okay.
10, I'm going with Tennessee. 11, I'm going to roll with Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's going to be my team this year.
I'm feeling a lot better about mine.
And then 12, I'm going with Memphis right there. But in the national championship, I think the Oregon Ducks beat the Georgia Bulldogs. Who do you have as the last 2 teams, and who wins it, McCash?
I didn't bracket mine, but off the top of my head, I would go Ohio State.
Okay.
Georgia.
Okay.
Ohio State, Georgia, with the Buckeyes winning it all.
Let's talk about the Heisman race. The 5 favorites, the favorite to win it, according to FanDuel, is Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback from Oregon. These are all quarterbacks in the top 5. You go after Gabriel in order. You go Carson Beck from Georgia, Quinn Ewers from Texas, Will Howard from Ohio State, and then Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee right there. Your thoughts on the Heisman race? Dylan Gabriel, the rightful favorite, and who would be your pick among these 5 or any other contender?
I would lean towards, because I think they'll make the national championship game, I'm going to lean towards Carson Beck at Georgia as my front runner right now. I see where Jackson Dart is at a plus 1,200 and pretty much in that 5th spot, according to BetMGM. But I do believe Seth Hennigan in Memphis is going to have statistically a better season than probably a lot of those quarterbacks listed. But he will not get the love, even though I think they'll make the playoff.
I am not going in those I'm not drawing a name from the top 5. I'm going to go with the 6th place favorite.
Okay.
And that's Jalen Milroe at Alabama. I think Kalen DeBoer can work some magic with the quarterback position, and I think he is going to have a prolific season throwing and running the ball. I think Alabama, the offense, is going to surprise some people this year, and I think Jalen Milroe is going to be the big beneficiary of that. I'm not as high on Quinn Ewers as everybody else. Good college quarterback. He's got to correct the arm angle stuff that leads to balls that drift down the field. Carson Beck, I just don't know if he's going to throw the ball enough to put the stats up that you need to win the Heisman. Dylan Gabriel, I think Oregon's another team that could run the ball pretty well. Will Howard, question marks there. Nico has to take the next step as a passer. And then you get to Jalen Milroe, and I look at it like quarterback guru, head coach, offense that he should be allowed to kind of air it out in. He was pretty good on the deep ball last year. Threat to run. I think he plays in a big conference, should be a national championship contender. I think he checks a lot of the boxes that you look for in a Heisman favorite, and I think he's good value there. My long shot is Donovan Edwards, the running back out of Michigan, who is currently 10,000 to 1 to win the Heisman. Michigan is not a program that we've talked a lot about on this episode, but I think if they are going to have success, it's going to be off the backs of their most talented players. And Donovan Edwards looks like a machine. And with a quarterback that is, taking over for J.J. McCarthy, offensive line turnover, questions about receivers with 2 guys going to the NFL, tight end in the NFL now that I say that, but they are replacing I can't remember the guy's name now, AJ Barner, with a guy that could be a first-round draft pick next spring. But Donovan Edwards, you looking for long odds right there to potentially win big. I wouldn't be surprised to see them lean on him as a bell cow and him have a prolific enough season to really get some love in the Heisman conversation. Anybody else you want to mention in this conversation before we wrap up the show this week talking about week 0?
The only one I have is somebody I was sweet on all last year, but never got to see him complete a pass, and that's Cam Rising. I think they're a sexy pick, to win the conference, their new conference, make the playoff. And I think if he's healthy and he delivers as he is on paper, I think he could be a nice little dark horse that, makes it to New York for the ceremony.
Oh, there you have it. Oh, yeah, I'm kind of with Jake here. Got to give Ollie Gordon some love as a dark horse, even though I hate the school. Jake's an Oklahoma fan. Boomer Sooner to Jake there. I like the idea as well. If we're talking dark horse Heisman contenders, because Ollie Gordon was a dark horse Heisman contender last year and had a prolific season, probably the best returning running back in college football this season. So I've got no qualms with that idea whatsoever. Let's talk about week 0, McCash. We've got let's break down Hawaii and Delaware State, baby.
Let's
Football
go.
is back. Hawaii, last I checked, this is according to FanDuel, 39.5-point favorites against Delaware State. Man, this Hawaii team has been really up and down the last couple of seasons. I've won some money off of Hawaii and I've lost some money on Hawaii.
Same.
That makes me terrified about a 39.5-point spread. But you mentioned the travel issues that Delaware State's having, and it kind of makes me, I don't know if it's just the itch to get back into the gambling game and bet on some football again, but I'm kind of wanting to sprinkle a little bit on that 39.5-point spread. The point total is set at over under 56.5, which is a point lower than when we wrote Tank the 401k this week. So people betting the under there feels like a number that, Hawaii's going to have to score the bulk of that 56.5 there. What is your faith level at with this Hawaii program? Can they cover a 39.5-point spread? Can they hit the over on 56.5 here?
Well, I don't know about them covering roughly 40 points. I mean, that's what they would have to win by to cover.
Yeah.
I don't trust Miami to do that, but I do trust that between the two schools, no matter how tired the Hornets are going to be, I do believe now that it's dropped to 56.5. I love this over. I loved it in the article. Look, Delaware had a flight. They didn't know really how charters work, so they missed their flight. I mean, they're not the flight wasn't chartered, because if you have a chartered flight, it's not leaving until you get there.
Right.
They were taking a traditional flight, but they were using charter buses to get them there. Charter buses don't stick around. You've got a schedule. You didn't meet the schedule. They're off to the next one. So they had to wait and fly out the next day, which was yesterday, take the flight. And instead of that being a direct flight that they originally planned, they had 3 stops along the way before they were able to get to Honolulu. I don't know what time they got in, but I'm expecting that Delaware State has arrived in paradise by now. Hopefully they're sleeping. But not only that problem, but when that game kicks off, it'll be midnight in Delaware when they're playing.
So that's a big adjustment to make.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm telling you, you're saying all this stuff like we don't know about a 40-point victory, but you're saying all this stuff. It kind of makes me think we could get a 40-point victory. So I don't know.
I'm thinking Delaware State gets anywhere from 10 to 17 points when it's all said and done, and then you just need 40 from Hawaii. Give me 6 touchdowns from the Fighting Rainbows or whatever they're called. And I think we got the over.
There you go. Montana State, FCS Montana State, 12.5-point favorites. That's another number that's changed since the column.
Okay.
12.5-point favorites at New Mexico with the point total sitting at over under 54.5. It's easy to me to, just peek behind the curtain, like pure transparency here. I don't know much about the New Mexico program. Montana State, I know, is a great FCS program. New Mexico, a program in transition. But classically speaking, you'd look at this and say, wow, an FCS team, 12.5-point favorites over an FBS team. Kind of crazy there. But I'm going to stay away from this one just because I haven't prepped for it. Do you have any thoughts on Montana State at New Mexico here?
I like the fact that it's a big point spread and it's New Mexico at home catching the points as the FBS team
Yeah,
uh, against Montana State, which, don't get me wrong, is a great FCS program. But New Mexico has a new head coach. This will be their first game with their new head coach. I know those players are going to be pumped, ready to run
excitement.
through a brick wall for him and be excited. And also, they're opening the season at home. So that's why I lean towards New Mexico covering this big spread. And I'm like you, I haven't deep dived either team, but if I have to pick one of these teams, and I'm a degenerate, so I will,
We're going vibes.
I'm going New Mexico plus the points.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I'm going to add a leg to my parlay
Yeah.
on Saturday that's going to have New Mexico and the points in it. But
if the utility bill's a week late, it's not that big of a deal.
it's the weather's fine out here. Who needs it right now? SMU, your beloved Mustangs, 24.5-point favorites on the road at Nevada with a point total set at over under 56.5. That's an interesting number because I feel like SMU probably could hang 57 on Nevada alone. Nevada, another program in transition. Will the Mustangs be able to capitalize on it, McCash?
The Mustangs, yes. This line opened around 28 points and has dropped
Interesting.
Since its opening. So I don't know what the betting public is seeing, but I'm loving the Mustangs on this. Kind of like New Mexico, this is their first game in a new conference. They're really wanting to showcase the talent that they have, bringing in from the ACC, the AAC from last year. And I think they'll be looking to make that statement and get the job done early in the season and making a point that, hey, we're in it to win it this year.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. I think the only thing that's going to prevent SMU from covering this number is if they get up by 24 and they take their foot off the gas or something like that. I think that's the only thing that's really stopping them. In a sense, SMU is the only thing that can stop SMU in this game. Lastly, we do get a pretty good matchup in Ireland, the annual Dublin Classic. Hey girl, are you from Ireland? Because my penis is Dublin game is what I'm going to call it. Florida State, 10.5-point favorites against Georgia Tech with a point total set at over under 55.5. I'm not going to lie, McCash. I kind of like the Yellow Jackets with this number. I'm not predicting them to win outright, but I think Brent Key has that program headed in the right direction. They've got stability with Haynes King coming back, some talent in the running back room, returning some starters on the offensive line. I think this could be a game, like I alluded to earlier, where there's been a lot of transition, a lot of turnover for Florida State. I think this could be a game you travel across the ocean to play it, where maybe things just haven't quite gelled yet. Maybe Florida State doesn't look like the undefeated Seminoles we saw last year, and maybe Georgia Tech is able to capitalize on that and keep this pretty close. I'm leaning Georgia Tech, and the number. Where are you leaning on this matchup?
I'm leaning Florida State. This line opened at 14.5 and has dropped 4 points since. So people are thinking a lot like you, which makes me believe you guys are going to be right because I'm usually on the opposite end of things.
This is the case where we're wrong. When everybody starts moving the number down, that's when you go the other way. So
yeah. So I do believe when it's all said and done, yes, I know Florida State lost everything last year, minus 8 people.
8 returning starters, yeah.
And a lot of people are high on this Georgia Tech team to be probably the most improved team in the conference this year.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this will be a close game like you were referring to. I just think the overall talent Florida State has is superior to what Georgia Tech has, even though it's new talent. So I think towards the end of the game, you're going to see that, that 7 to 10 point game turn into a last minute, 13, 14 point game where Florida State ekes out the cover.
Fair enough. Well, that gets us to the end of another college football roundup. Thank you guys for hopping in the comments, letting us know, and chatting with us today. We do want to remind you that we are brought to you by Memo's Mexican Kitchen. Was just out there on Friday night, had Roxanne and Carter in. If you listen to Phone It In here on Sobros Network, she was here in Nashville for the Sobros birthday party. Introduced her and her hubs to Memo's Mexican Kitchen. They both agreed it was fantastic. Carter got the carnitas. Roxanne got the quesadilla following my recommendation. I've been telling y'all on this podcast and other Sobros podcasts to get that quesadilla. She got it, said it was fantastic. And another set of satisfied customers out there at Memo's Mexican Kitchen, just a mile north of I-40 off the Mount Juliet exit. In my opinion, the best Mexican food in the Nashville area. I'm at Stoney Keeley on Twitter, at Sobros Network on all other social media platforms. McCash, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
At MC_Cash75 on Twitter. That's really where it is. And look out Monday, wherever you listen to podcasts, because there will be a new episode or the season premiere of season 2 of Eye on the Tigers podcast. It's a podcast all about the University of Memphis as we prepare for our season opener against North Alabama.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in. He is our utility man, Stephen McCash. I'm Big Natural Stoney Keeley. And until next week, you stay classy, college football fans, and enjoy week 0.